All right, thank you, Natalie, for the introduction. So thanks everyone for being here and for listening to my talk, and thanks for inviting me. When I was asked to speak, I wasn't quite sure initially what to present, and then I thought I'll actually raise one problem that we noticed in our lab. So I'll give a little bit of an introduction of what we do, or at least I'll give a couple of examples, and then I'll explain why I believe that technology transfer at the moment, it can be a bit of a bottleneck in advancing this. Basically, the scientific community sometimes runs behind what is the actual latest, the cutting edge in the technology. So, it's not working. Okay. So, sorry. This is the typical technology transfer route according to an academic. So there's a specific need, then the lab or a team will develop the tools which are required to solve or to address that specific need. And then eventually, once the tools are developed, there will be a search for a commercialization partner if whatever tool was developed could be of interest for the wider community. The reality is that the industry side of things thinks differently. So they need to be sure that the need is proven, and it's not just a need from that specific lab or that niche community, and that there is an existing solid market, or that the market opportunity is large enough to actually make sense to invest. Then there will be a prototype development, and there will be product development, and all these will take time. And then at the end, there will be product delivery. So there could be years from when the need was originally identified and the first eventual prototype solution was developed in a lab, to when the wider community will actually have access to the effective tools that are needed to solve these problems. And now I'm going to go through just two examples, basically, that we have kind of developed lately in our lab, and that are not available outside our group. So I will talk about a new category of X-ray focusing lenses, and then a new method to identify or to study the protein composition in individual cells. And then I'm going to go through what I feel is what are the bottlenecks basically in transferring the technology, or what we could be doing to speed this up. So starting on the X-ray lenses, so we have in our lab we have a sort of pretty unique setup where we're able to carve pretty much any sort of shape, and you can make lenses or micro lenses of various kinds. Here are examples of some of the optical elements that we made. So some hybrid diffractor refractive lenses, which can be so basically can combine multiple elements in one. Lenses or optical elements with variable curvature, which can be very useful for patterning, and some elements that word trapping, for example. And one of the elements that we made, that we started focusing on, was on the development of more efficient lenses for X-ray microscopy. So if one think of a lens, just to give an overview, because I'm not sure what the audience background is. Just generally can take a plane wave and will focus it on a spot. So this is something that everybody has experienced with a magnifying lens, for example. Reality is that most of the lens is actually not useful. We don't really need it. We only need this front part, the curved surface. So one way to prepare a lens would be eventually to remove entirely it will be basically just flattened. And what this does, basically, this is called zone plate. Fresnel has introduced this almost a century ago, and it works perfectly fine. In the visible range, this is how they build lenses for lighthouses, where they need to be 2 meters in diameter. Or everybody had in the past in advance on the back window there was one of these Fresnel zone plates to see basically the bottom, look at the back basically. In X-rays, it was not possible to actually physically make this type of lens, so it was typically done in a little bit in a rougher manner, so the profile of the lens would be binary, and this is for limitations in the fabrication. So what we did in the lab is, because we have these capabilities for making very nice grayscale lithography, we prepared for the first time. We actually made these profiles the way they're supposed to be. So these profiles are called kinoform, which is essentially there are sections. Each zone has a section of a parabola. So it was beautiful. We made all these lenses. We went to the synchrotron. We measured. And we were very excited until the moment where we realized that our lens was not the good one. So somebody in 1982 had done a mistake in the math and forgot to take into account the absorption. So we realized that the perfect lens in the X-ray domain is not that perfect due to some limitations in the materials we can use. So we're not quite completely taken down by this. So we went back to the drawing board and we thought, okay, these are the two profiles that we're dealing with. What if we were to make a different profile simply? So now I'm going to call it the mystery lens because of one of the technology transfer bottleneck is that now we have pending IP. So I can't tell you what it is, but I can show you that it's a lot better than the others, because the original binary has a certain efficiency, which we know being between 10 and 20%. Our kinoform lenses were unfortunately worse. The mystery lens has 2.5 times the efficiency. This is fantastic, and it can see plenty of use especially in soft X-ray microscopy or soft X-ray tomography, where somebody wants to look at the ultrastructure of cells in a well-preserved manner. It's great because there will be less radiation damage. We'll be able to image much thicker samples. There's one problem. If you want this lens, you need to be in my lab, or that will be the case until somebody will produce them on a larger scale. Next, single cell proteomics. As I said, so this is a field which is exploding at the moment. It's very bustling. So we have, the goal is to understand what is the composition of cells, so the protein composition in cells, and what's the difference between different cells. So we started by developing tools that could allow this. So this is how conventional microfluidic works. So essentially, microfluidic is nothing else than a system where you have many wells, and these wells are separated by valves typically, and the volumes of fluid that you're handling are in the nanoliter or femtoliter range. And the way it works typically, because of the scale, is that if you want to mix two components, you will predefine the volumes, and then you will just open up the valve that separates the two compartments, and they will just mix instantly because the volume is so small that diffusion will basically take place very quickly. We developed here a system where we are a lot more free to choose which type, which volumes we want to use, and we have a little more control over it. So we did something which sounds normal in a larger scale. So have an open well that you can fill up, but in the micro scale, this was not that straightforward to build. So we made a system that has fluid sensors, level sensor, temperature sensors. We can mix. There's a whole bunch of let's say cool features. We have full control over how much we want to fill with what, and what's going to be the timing. We thought, okay, that's very good because we can prepare protocols. We can optimize protocols directly in the micro scale, which will be more efficient than preparing everything on the larger scale and then miniaturize. And because the micro scale is actually a lot more efficient when it comes to analytics, we thought, let's apply this to single cell proteomics. So we've analyzed the workflow. So we start from cells, we trap them, we perform all the lysis, digestion, all the steps that are required to prepare the sample, and then we analyze it from mass spectrometry. These are this is just an example of the data set we get. So we can count how many proteins we get from individual cells. and we can quantify each of these proteins, and we can kind of identify difference between different type of cells. Everything is great. The number of proteins that we could identify is always between 1,300 and 1,800 proteins, which is almost double the current state of the art, which was published a few months ago, being 800 for some type of cells, and 1,050 proteins for a single cell was the maximum number that was ever published. Well, for us, we appear to be doing better. But again, I can't really give out this technology very easily to everyone, because even if I describe it, most labs will not be able to replicate immediately. They will need expertise. And that's where technology transfer comes in place. So the first problem that I identified is that it's not fair to the researchers that are involved in the development to be kind of acting as technicians to aid other labs. Because it's basically outsourcing our services to a different lab. And it's difficult because method-oriented research groups, and I'm talking about groups like my own, where we don't apply the methods, we actually just solve problems for others, right, in a way. They have very limited experience in the application. So we know how to fix the problem. We don't know, we don't care to some extent what the problem was generated from. And there is a lack of specialized know-how outside the group or that environment that has developed the technology. And that's, the difference between prototype development and product development. Product development is ready to use by everyone. A prototype is ready to use by the expert only. There is a minimal interest in applying the methods that were developed by the people that actually have developed them. So I can tell that none of my postdocs have any interest in applying their methods. They just want to go and move and develop something new. They don't want to use them, which is fine because that's the type of person I need. There is also little career gain for this type of people to actually re-implementing an existing technology. Their CV is based on the number of technologies they develop. And supporting users is also very time-consuming, frustrating activity for researchers. This is a service-oriented task, which requires a certain personality, which is patient generally. And none of the people that I have in the group, for example, could successfully sort of help a user for longer than a couple of days without going nuts. So the typical path to transferring technology, generally, so this is how it's seen from far. So, you have the original developer, then there is an industry partner, which is supposedly appearing magically out of somewhere. And then there's the general public, which will simply be ready and have a lot of need for that technology, which will be ready to buy it. The reality is slightly different because the original developers, between the original developers and the industry, there will have to be a large enough niche of early adopters, which will most likely have to be able to kind of deal with a prototype or with a home-built solution. And then between the industry and the general public, there will be another round of early adopters, which will deal with product prototypes, which will be terrible. But again, it's a required step in order to obtain feedback and generate a product which goes to the general public. So what really this timeline looks like is, you develop something, there will be some early adopters which will run for a certain amount of time, depending how many these are. And then industry development will take a certain amount of time because they need to produce something which is safe, which is easy to use, which fulfills many more needs than the individual lab originally predicted, because otherwise nobody will buy that product. And then there will be another round of early adopters and then the general public. So let's assume that original developer is sitting here and his best friend or his neighbor actually has a need. So generally speaking, what the neighbor will have to do is wait for the general public to have access, as everyone else in the general public, which is a crazy situation because originally that second person, the red person here was sitting next to the original developer. And this is happening actually in my institution. Right? We develop something and my neighbor would like to use it, but I don't have the capacity to support the development or replication of the technology, application of the technology in their lab. So what happens is that they need to wait for a commercial product to become available, but they literally sit 10 meters away from my office. This is happening all the time, and this should not be the case. And why is that? It's because what I feel is that there would be a general need in multiple institutions of some sort of technology transfer platform, which is not an office, which is talking to industry and is trying to convince them to buy the technology, but it's basically people with a technically oriented mindset and experience, which what they do is that they take something which is built in a lab and they make a prototype and they support the prototype for early adopters. That's basically is gonna shorten the time for industry interest. And it's also gonna make a much more efficient industry engagement, which generally speaking for us, it means more money coming in because we can get a lot more efficient investments. The product development will also be shorter because it will not be, so the original product, the original need was not developed for one specific need, but it will be developed for a wider community. So it will be already much closer to what a commercial partner would need. And then the general public will get access a lot quicker to the technology. It is my personal view, but it's based on the experience that I've had both in academia and on the commercial side. And I have the feeling that this would be beneficial. But I'm very curious to hear what you think about. And in this case, basically, our red friend would eventually have early access, a lot earlier access to the technology, basically. So then the general public. Now, I'd like to thank essentially you for your attention, and this is my team, and I'm happy to take any question.